All right. What time is it? 7:04. I think we're good to go. So thank you everyone for joining us this evening or morning, depending on, I guess, where you're signing in from, to this spring edition of the Key Spouse Engagement Series. This is on the Key Spouse Program Refresh. We know that you have very, very, very busy schedules, especially this time of the year. So we really appreciate you all for taking the time to tune in and engage and hear what we have to say about this Key Spouse Program Refresh, and hopefully get some ideas from you as well. But before we reveal the long-awaited Key Spouse Program Refresh works in progress, I would like to welcome Mrs. Shireen Brown, spouse of the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, General C.Q. Brown, and Mrs. Johanna Gagnon, spouse of the Deputy Chief of Space Operations for Intelligence, Major General Gregory Gagnon, to give some opening remarks. So Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Gagnon, over to you.
All righty. We are super excited to be here tonight. So, I should go back and say, hey, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whichever time zone that you are in. We are super happy to have you here in the Zoom room with us. So the sun is setting here, and I have my glass of iced tea to keep me caffeinated, so I'm ready to go. So, as always, we appreciate that you are taking the time out of your busy schedule to join in on this Key Spouse engagement titled Refresh. I always enjoy the time to spend time with you, and I'm grateful for our A1S team as well as our AFPC team for all the thought and effort that they put into the Key Spouse program, where we are and what lies ahead. I'm immensely grateful for their coordinating for this event today. And I'm happy to share that I am super excited. I can't even speak. I'm so excited I can't even speak. But I'm super excited that they're coordinating this event and that they're going to share the progress that's been made and answer any and all of your questions today. For almost 2 years now, we have been collecting feedback from our command teams and from you, the key spouses. As you well know, the Department of the Air Force is diverse, and to refresh a program to meet the needs of everyone has been no easy feat. I hope today provides our key spouses with some encouragement with the how we proceed is based on the feedback from both you, our key spouses, and our command teams that have been provided that are a part of all of this. As we come together, I encourage you to engage in the chat with everyone. This interaction helps us to see that the experiences and challenges and the successes within the program have similarities and differences. I look forward to the discussion that's sure to come. And now I'd like to turn it over to my co-host, my partner in crime for this evening, Johanna Gagnon. Jana, over to you.
Thank you, Shireen. I appreciate you, and thanks for letting me step in for Jennifer Saltzman tonight. She's got a very busy schedule, as do you. I hope that everyone had a wonderful Military Spouse Appreciation Day last week. It is not lost on Shireen and I that right now is an especially busy time of the year, and so we are very grateful that you all chose to spend this time with us, regardless of what time of day it is for you. I am excited to be here with everyone to see and hear about the new updates that are coming down the pipeline for this Key Spouse program. I am always in awe and amazed at all of our military spouses and the knowledge and initiative and passion that they bring to the table, and especially for those of you who choose to participate in the Key Spouse program. One of the topics tonight is going to be connectedness, which happens to be one of the core values of the Space Force, but I digress. And engagements like these are one of the opportunities where we can share our thoughts and experiences to help connect us across this crazy Department of the Air Force family, especially while we're figuring out all of the new stuff and how it's going to move towards the future. Shireen and I love feedback. I am one of those people that raises my hand told a lot during any conference or convention that I attend. And we encourage you guys to give feedback as well, and to use the chat function that is capable within Zoom to ask questions and provide your thoughts on the program updates as we go along. Your feedback and ideas have been and will continue to be what drives the changes in the Key Spouse program. So I look forward to hearing from all of you. And that's it. That's all I got.
All right. Yes. Wonderful job to both of you. Thank you so much to Mrs. Brown and Mrs. Gagnon. We appreciate your time, not just today, but all the time you spend championing initiatives for the betterment of military families, to include your insights, experience, and leadership with the Key Spouse program. So thanks to both of you for being here today and for all of your efforts for military families. We appreciate you. All right. Now, we'll jump into this Key Spouse program refresh. Again, my name is Andrea Perkins. I think I skipped my entire intro, so it was not again. My name is Andrea Perkins from the Airmen and Family Care Division. I work at Headquarters Air Force. I'll be dual-hatted today as your MC and then also as your subject matter experts, one of the main people that's been working on these program updates. I've been working with the Key Spouse program for a year and a half now, and for that entire time, we have been conducting surveys and questionnaires, gathering feedback, listening to spouses and families, taking questions, trying to figure out the best future for the Key Spouse program, and figure that out for all the stakeholders. Thank you to all of you on the line who have engaged with us along the way, who've provided insights and feedback, who've asked questions, who've given recommendations, and who have taken the time to talk to us. We have taken all of your insights for consideration, and we appreciate all of you. So thank you. All right. I realize that I may have overdone the animations that I've included in my PowerPoint, so it might just take a couple seconds to click from slide to slide, but momentarily, there we go. We'll have on the screen an overview of today's agenda. About an hour in, depending on how we get through this agenda and what the questions are, we'll take a 10-minute intermission just for a break, and then another opportunity for us to engage with each other and connect in the chat. We hope tonight's event is true engagement. We hope that it's filled with conversation, discussion, chatting. I've put some slides together for us to talk through, to highlight some of the changes that we've made or are in the process of making, which also address questions that we've received in advance via the questionnaire that was on the registration links. Please utilize the chat feature liberally throughout our time together. I'll pause after each section and segment to review what has been asked in the chat and address any questions that come up. I also kindly request that unless you're just saying hello, which I don't want to discourage, to please not send a question to me directly in the chat. I only say that because it is not my gift to talk, read, and text or chat back with you all at the same time. And if I miss a comment that you've directed to me after we end this engagement, it's gone forever. And we do not want to miss any of your questions. So if you are not comfortable asking a question in front of the group in the chat, there are a couple other ways that you can make sure that your questions or concerns get listened to. First of all, you can email me. My email is andrea.perkins.2@us.af.mil. You do not need to commit that to memory. It will be on the screen later in the slide deck. So that is one way to email me afterwards. And then alternatively, as we do at all Key Spouse engagements, we have an opportunity to provide feedback at the end of this section or the end of this event. And that will be another way that you could input a question or a concern that you have about these refresh ideas that we will address. If we don't address your question tonight, it's not because we're never ever gonna. It may be because we don't have it all figured out yet. And we might have to take your question for action later. Or it might be a very specific segment of the population that it's related to. And we will do a Q&A of all of the questions that have been asked and the answers to them and post them on the AFPC Key Spouse website as well. So fear not, your questions will be answered. At this point, I'll just pause if there's any questions on housekeeping, any questions about if we're going to post these slides, post anything. I see it already in the chat that we did put that the slides for today will be available at the Key Spouse AFPC website. All right. I don't see any other questions yet. That's okay. I bet they're coming. So this is an overview. We just did opening comments. I'll give you a program history of the Key Spouse program. We'll do the refresh overview. At that point, we'll probably take a break and then answer any additional questions that you've thought of or chatted about over that little intermission. We'll do a best practices panel. It's a little paradoxical in this event because it's only one person, but they're presenting great things. And so we'll talk about a toolkit that is available to all of you, and looking forward to that. And then we'll have closing comments and we'll be done until next time. So that is the plan for today. See if my slides will advance here. There we go. All right, before we look at where we're going, I think it's important to look at where we've been. In the late 90s, the Key Spouse program was a quality of life initiative, and it was modeled after the Navy Ombudsman program. Each MADCOM had a different look to the program and a different name that went along with it. Throughout the next decade, up until 2009, there was a voluntary implementation that was eventually adopted by all MADCOMs. The year of the Air Force family, 2009, is when the Key Spouse program really took off. During this time, there was a requirement to assess the Key Spouses and appoint them, in addition to the mandate to utilize the initial training curriculum.
Do you want booby time for a minute? Okay, mommy.
All right.
Please make sure you're muting yourselves, please.
From around 2009 to 2016, there was an annual memo released by the CSAF that emphasized the importance of the Key Spouse program. For years, that annual memo was the only guidance on the program. In 2018, based on feedback from you or people serving in your roles at the time, a virtual Key Spouse initial training was implemented. 2021 was when we really started to look at program revitalization to discern if the program had evolved with military families over time, or if updates were needed to meet the needs of the modern family. During this time, the CSAF, CSO, SIMSAF, SIMSIF, and all their spouses released a memo that again encouraged utilization of the Key Spouse program by commanders. It also provided a survey so that we could gather feedback. This is also when the first Key Spouse engagement series was launched so that we could be more closely connected with spouses. All right, so throughout history, this has been a CSAF program executed by commanders, and eventually the MNFRCs gained administrative role. This construct will remain and is part of what makes the Key Spouse program so complicated. It's a CSAF program administered by MNFRCs, executed by commanders. We'll talk more about this complexity throughout our conversation here today. With that, I will make sure that we don't have any questions. All right, this question or this will be recorded and posted at the AFPC Key Spouse website, and the slides will be there as well. All right. So let us talk about an overview of what we've been working on. There we go. All right, the Key Spouse Program refresh slide, which I'm on now, shows an overview of some of the main things that we've been working on and getting after. One of them is the name. We know that we have to rename the program. I'll go into more detail on the next slide, but what's been really important to us is having a name that's both inclusive of everybody that wants to be involved with the Key Spouse Program, and then also descriptive of what the position entails. We understand that we have to have a plan to roll this out and incorporate all the changes. We are neck deep in StratCom plans to identify key stakeholders, how to best communicate with them, and what needs need to be communicated when to roll out the refreshed program. So we have a plan. We're not just going to say, hey, here's a new name, go, do, conquer. We have a plan on how we're going to roll these things out. Next, we looked at the objectives, and if the objectives that we have were meeting the needs of the modern Department of the Air Force family. I expect that we'll have many questions on this as we go into more detail in the future slides today, but as an overview, where we landed is readiness, resources, and connectedness as the mainstays of the refreshed Key Spouse Program. Another big thing that we looked at was the training. We know that Key Spouses are busy and that Key Spouses are volunteers. Therefore, we really need to modernize the training, make it virtual, asynchronous, and shorter, so there's an opportunity to accomplish training in a time frame that meets individuals' needs while providing just what is needed to be successful in the role. With that said, it's not lost on us the importance of connection to local resources. The last portion of the initial Key Spouse training will be a connection to those local resources through the Military and Family Readiness Centers. We'll go into much more detail on this concept in the upcoming slides. The last main item we know needs refreshing are the tools we make available to you. As busy volunteers, there is not time to create from scratch everything you need to know to be successful. We're continuing to go through what we offer in terms of tools and resources and templates to make them easily adaptable to meet your needs. We have an amazing teammate from the 5 and Thrive team. I believe Miss Laura Browning will be talking to us tonight and show us an outstanding resource they created. Furthermore, one of the main complaints we hear from Key Spouses is the lack of engagement from command teams. From our seat, we think there are several things we can do to help improve that interaction. One of them is strategic communication plan that we are drafting, and as you guessed, we will talk more about that in this engagement. If you have questions on these, feel free to pop them in the chat. We will talk a lot more thoroughly on each of these concepts, but if it's in your head now and you don't want to forget it, feel free to ask questions. With that, we will go into perhaps the most challenging piece of this whole refresh, and that's a new name. Let me tell you that we have received a lot of bad press about renaming because it has been perceived as the first thing and maybe the only thing we were going to do with the updated Key Spouse program. If you think back to the previous slides, when we're looking at things like updating the tools and guidance, when we're looking at things like updating the training, we need to have a name to do those things effectively and efficiently, or else we'll have to go back and put a new name into all of those things. And so there was also a concern that the program wouldn't be reformatted, that we were just going to rename it and call it good. And I promise you that is exactly what we do not want to do. We want to make this a program that fits the need of the modern Air and Space Force families, and help command teams be able to execute it. I hope we're able to illustrate in our time together that we are refreshing the top areas of concern that have been identified in the questionnaires, the surveys, and the feedback that we've been collecting over the past few years. But if you think we're missing something, or if you think we're going about something the wrong way, please do not keep it a secret. We really do want to know your thoughts. We also know that we have not been super transparent or transparent at all, really, in the changes that we've been making through the Key Spouse program. It's not been intentional. If you think of this as the CSAF program administered by MNFRCs, executed by commanders, it's different from anything else that we do. And we've been trying to figure out what this refresh looks like, what we need to do to make it better, and how to communicate that all at the same time. We've been just kind of keeping our heads down, going after to work and to gather information and make recommendations based on your stakeholder feedback. We have been taking all of that and considering what is executable within our left and right bounds and parameters, and attempting to figure out the best answer that is going to be the right thing for all stakeholders. So let me talk through this slide. In that top left, we're coming up on 2 years now that we did a survey or questionnaire on Key Spouse rebranding, identifying the challenges faced by Key Spouses. The two on your screen are the lack of spouse engagement and overcoming a negative stigma. While it's not necessarily a one-for-one, we don't know for sure that a name change will solve these two issues. We think it will help a lot, that the lack of engagement with something that individuals used to associate with a negative stigma, a new refresh program we hope will help people re-engage. Let me pause and tell you, if you came to the Key Spouse renaming town hall, this is mostly the same slide. So this is just a recap of what we've covered. In that middle, the top middle portion, we did another questionnaire in May of 21 and found that 42% of respondents indicated that the Key Spouse program represented the objectives in the vision, which means that either half didn't agree or disagreed that it represented the objectives in the vision. We also found that 46% of respondents thought that the name was inclusive. That meant that over half thought it neither was nor wasn't, or it for sure wasn't inclusive. So this indicated that we needed a name change. Lastly, in the commander feedback, we found that 79% of respondents thought that we needed to change the name. So it was pretty clear to us we need to change the name. But what should we call it? Let me tell you, we have looked at hundreds of submissions of what people think that it should be called. It's been a lot of fun and a labor of love. So in our first survey, the top 3 are listed there on your screen as number 1, unit support liaison or team, number 2, key support program, and number 3, commander liaison or commander support program. Commanders did not like that number 3 option. They were very vocal about not wanting it to be called the commander something, something, something. And so that was out for us. If we look at those objectives in the top left again, like the lack of engagement from Key Spouses and overcoming a negative stigma, we thought that keeping the name Key in the title would also keep some of the stigma that was associated with the program. Also, we've heard from spouses, not just Key Spouses, but spouses, and thinking, if I'm not a Key Spouse, then what am I? What does that make me? a regular spouse, a non-key spouse, I don't know. So there wasn't great feedback for the key support program outside of key spouses, current key spouses. So the unit support liaison or unit support team was, in that initial survey, what led the way. Then we released another survey thinking that maybe it would be fun to have a acronym that stood for something and was catchy and modern and fun. And whew, we got some more bad press there too. I think the main thing is that we did not do a good job of telling individuals the thought process that went behind these acronyms or these names. And so when we did we were hoping with the key spouse, the renaming town halls, that if we had an opportunity to explain the top two, Fusion and Star Connector, then maybe people would pick one or another unit support liaison or team, or Fusion or Star Connector. Maybe they'd be able to throw their backing better to one of those. And so that's what we did. Now we move to the right hand corner. And that was the feedback we got from the renaming town hall. In session one, it was a dead tie between unit support liaison and unit support team and Fusion as the names that people liked. So that didn't give us any insight into what we should change the name to. And then the second session was a little bit more leaning towards Fusion than it was leaning toward unit support liaison team for those participants. They liked Fusion a little bit better than they liked unit support team. So that, I think this just helps to demonstrate the complexity of what we're trying to do, because key spouses like one name. Spouses who are stakeholders in this process, right? They're the ones that we want to be connected to, like something else, and command teams like something else. And so we're taking all that feedback and trying to find the best answer for everyone. So it has been quite the challenge. Our goal was to have a name by the 31st of May. That was our goal of this year. I think we'll be close. I don't think we'll hit 31 May, but I think in June we'll be able to release a name that has been supported and got a lot of good feedback for. I also think that with us having engagements like these, even if somebody is a staunch supporter of option A, they have an understanding of why option B was chosen and can support it even though it wasn't their favorite. So that's what we're hoping as we're doing more of these engagements, more of these interactions, to help get some buy-in, even if it wasn't people's first choice of the name, and help gain some understanding as to why those names were chosen. All right. With that, I'm pausing to see if there are questions in the chat that I can help to answer. For the lack of engagement, is that a lack of engagement to reach out to the key spouse, or lack of people willing to become a key spouse? So in the survey or the questionnaire that we conducted, the lack of engagement was lack of families that were interested in participating in the program. They did not want to engage, and or key spouses were working very hard and diligently to identify things that families wanted to do and get their feedback, and then people just didn't show up. And so those were the main things that we were working through. Okay. All right, somebody mentioned that they're new to the Key Spouse program and unaware of any negative connotation that the name has. And so I think that it may be the program itself and not just the name. I maybe stated that poorly. I think that in some places, at some units, people have had a bad interaction with the Key Spouse program. I've used this analogy before, but I don't like it, but it's the best one I've got. It's been associated with kind of Mean Girls. Like if you think of Mean Girls, like you're either in or you're out, you're in the crowd or you're not, and you're treated that way. And so if you're treated that way in unit X at this certain base, when you go to the next one, you're not going to want to associate with that program, right? Because you had such a bad experience. So that is not, it's not a huge plague across all of our installations and all of our programs, but we did find that there are more individuals that we would like that have experienced that. And so that is what they were referring to with overcoming negative stigma, somebody who had a bad experience somewhere and was applying that to the new unit and didn't want to be involved with the program again. All right, so we have had a lot of feedback, like what's in the chat, that if a program needs to be explained to the end user, it isn't very helpful. Well, I think that we've heard that, and we're not really afraid of that as an issue, because at one point, the Key Spouse program had to be socialized and explained, right? So as long as we have a strategic communication plan, as long as we do this right, which is the challenge, whatever the name is chosen to be, we think that we can do a good job of getting buy-in and letting people know that this is a program that is for you, and this is what it's called. And so I think that we can make that work. All right, this is what we're going to do. Denise is in the background here from our AFPC team. If you can please just kind of jot down some of these questions for me so I can, it's easier, like, and read them out so I don't have to scroll through. I would really appreciate that. And we'll make sure all of the questions that are in this segment are answered on the next pause. Cool. Awesome. So we're not skipping you. We're just doing this a little bit better. All right. So the next thing that we were trying to refresh are the objectives. The previous objectives are up there on your screen, and those are to improve outreach and engagements, increase awareness of resources, strengthen family connectedness, support families during separation, and have continuously enhance information flow. Okay, that's nice. Were they meeting the mark? Probably not. One of the worst feedback that we received from the commander survey is that a large majority thought that the Key Spouse program was not meeting the needs of the modern family. And so that's not good. So we needed to look at the objectives. Let me tell you that there was a lot of thought and a lot of consideration that went into these refreshed objectives. First, we have the Air Force, right? Pretty established military department, has a outlined chain of command and all the things established. Then we have the Space Force establishing themselves new, trying to make sure that we have a program that can kind of see what it is that they need, and be flexible as they build their own culture to have something that fits them and their families. So there was issue number one. Secondly, a lot of us think about just the active duty component, right? That's where a lot of our feedback comes from. But we also have the Guard and Reserve. the Guard and Reserve have very different needs and very different considerations from the active duty component, especially when it comes to a key spouse program. If you think about these components, you have Guard and Reserve populations whose family doesn't, well, for the Reserve, whose family doesn't even live in the state. Do you think they want to be connected to resources in another state? That's not helpful. So a key spouse program has to look a little bit different for Guard or Reserve, where we have to give commanders the flexibility that they need to be successful in leading a key spouse program. Not only that, but do you know how diverse the Department of the Air Force is? Think about all the different types of units that we have. We have CE units, we have COPS, we have flying units, maintenance units, comm units, medical groups, medical units, space units. We have FSS, force support professionals, legal professionals. We have logistics readiness. We have an Air Force band. Like, do you think that those populations need the same type of program? Like a very standardized program won't fit what each of these types of units need. They each have their own culture. Furthermore, these little green dots represent the different considerations, like, is it an OCONUS population versus a CONUS population? Is it a very rural community where a lot of the families live on base, or is it urban community where people are coming and commuting from an hour from every direction? So we have GSUs, we have international communities, we have civilian populations. When you think about how complex that the Department of the Air Force is, we need a very flexible program so that we are equipping our command teams for success, and not putting them in a corner and saying that this is what you need to do. And so with all of those thoughts, we really thought that the refreshed objectives need to provide command teams from all those components, active, Guard, and Reserve, for Air and Space Force. They all have diverse missions, diverse personnel, with the flexibility to work through 3 common goals, and that is readiness, resources, and connectedness. So the ability to connect people to each other and people to resources so that we have and can support mission readiness. Let me talk through each of these a little bit. So for readiness, I think active duty a lot, and even some Guard and Reserve units, we think deployment. Not all units have a huge deployment capabilities. They have low ops tempos. Readiness can also be financial readiness, which can also be employment readiness. If you think about Guard and Reserve, they could have issues with having spouses employed, or even their uniform wearers have full-time employment outside of the Guard or Reserve, which could lead to financial difficulties, which could lead to their inability to be retained or to deploy, or all of these are considerations with readiness. It doesn't have to focus specifically on deployment, but it is important. Readiness is a key component of the new key spouse or the refreshed key spouse program. We also need to think about the resources and equipping our people with what they need to be successful as a military family. We had some good feedback from the questionnaire, and making sure that we are training key spouses, new key spouses, on how to connect people with resources rather than solve problems for them. So that is a key thing for us, to make sure that we know and we train spouses on where they can find the subject matter experts who can connect them with what they need, rather than being the end-all be-all problem solver for those individuals. And then lastly, connectedness. This is a piece that we really wanted to touch more on, because connectedness can look so different at different units. it could be social media, it could be social engagements. This event is a form of connectedness. And I know that there is a lot of questions about funding and fundraising. And so I just want to be clear that as a key spouse, there's no fundraising because you are an official representative of the department, right, as a volunteer even. So that makes things hard. And one of the things that we really are looking at, our training and asking of our key spouses is to be transparent and communicate with commanders as you're meeting with them and saying if the commander wants connectedness to look like bundles for new babies or to look like welcome packages for incoming families, and there's no money, like that needs to be communicated. Say, I hear you, sir, ma'am. How are we going to fund that? So we're not having to come out of our own pockets, and we can be creative about how we are going to get after this connectedness piece without asking too much of you, our key spouses. So we were talking with Mrs. Brown in a pre-brief to this, and she had a recent conversation with a key spouse, and I think she wanted to share some thoughts on budgeting with you all here tonight and how you might consider funding and asking for funding and budgeting as you walk through this key spouse life. So ma'am, if you're still on and available to come on mic and want to share with us your thoughts on funding and budgeting for the key spouse program.
No, thanks, Andrea. Thanks for that. So I am fortunate to travel and connect with many of our amazing Air Force families around the globe. And so recently, as Andrea just mentioned, I was chatting with a key spouse who had concerns with funding, or rather the lack of, to support events. So let me share some of what we talked about on this topic. Now, here's something that we might want to think about as we go forward. Rather than approaching the commander, the first sergeants, or even your booster club a few weeks in advance to ask for money to support an event, consider what funds are needed to support the events you want to host to better disseminate information to your unit's airmen, guardians, and their families throughout the entire year. Then make and present a plan to your command team. With this, then, by having an annual budget, it gives you the ideas, about different things. Let me just rephrase that a little bit. By having that annual budget, it gives more credibility as to who you are. It also shows how serious you are and committed you are to the Key Spouse program and to get information and resources by demonstrating your advanced planning and showing the thought that went into them. It also gives the command teams a chance to plan and think through the different opportunities that may be available for them for the money that is available to help support you, because they may have programs or they may have at least an idea as to how to be able to disseminate whatever funds they may gather together to give out to you. Proposing an annual budget can also help start a conversation to ensure that the commander and the key spouse ideas align to meet the needs of the unit and the families. So a little later, I know that Andrea is going to talk to us about the training and tool updates. So I think these budget plans will fit nicely into each of those and help our key spouses think through and build a budget to support connectedness through these events. So with that, let me turn it back over to Andrea. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your insights into that and you for sharing your great idea on having a budget. So we will work that into our training and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. So appreciate that.
Excellent.
Thank you. I see in the chat that there was questions about the reserve, the changes for the reserve component. Let me talk a little bit more about that in the next slides. How we're going to make this more friendly for the reserve component. Is there anything else, Denise, that I have to address?
Yes, so we have a question that states, what challenges have been identified by the command team? So we talked about the challenges identified by key spouses. Do we know what challenges have been identified by the command teams?
We
Was the
do.
question.
That is a great question. And I have a slide, so I'll post that on the website as well, so you can see some of the main feedback that we got from them. You might not be surprised to hear that having a program that mandates a volunteer is a huge concern for commanders. They have difficulty that recruiting. Commanding is a full-time job, right? Like a more than full-time job. And trying to figure out how to recruit a volunteer to serve in a mandatory role, they don't like that. And I can't really blame them. That's a difficult position to be in, right? And funding is the other thing, that they're trying to support a program that has no funding set aside to do what they think is important for their people and their population. So those are the top two things, challenges that commanders faced. Some other interesting things we found from the commander survey is that there was a big difference in how command teams felt about the Key Spouse program based on ops tempo. So command teams that had high ops tempo, big deployments, they liked the Key Spouse program. And then units like the med group, for example, who didn't have such high ops tempo, they really did not view the Key Spouse program favorably. So when I talk about diversity on the previous slide, those are some of the things that we're looking at to afford maximum flexibility, so that our diverse units can have a program that works for them. All right. Anything else, Denise?
Okay, so the other one is, will there be another opportunity to vote for the name, and did commanders get the opportunity to vote?
So probably not another opportunity to vote. I think that we have exhausted our surveys. I don't even know how many that we've done or feelers that we've got over the past few years, but then the next step for us is to push out and to crowdsource commanders. We know that we have given the Key Spouse population a much bigger opportunity to give feedback in forms such as these than we have command teams. So that is before we release the name, like, we have to have commander support and buy-in. So that's the next step, to gauge how they're feeling on the name and give them an opportunity to provide some feedback. All right. So the Key Spouse training, we know that it has to be asynchronous and virtual because we have to meet the needs of busy volunteers, right? We have to. We'll break it down into these 4 components: an overview, and then talk readiness, resources, and connectedness, those main objectives. We'll also include a session on funding. We know that that is something we've been missing. We've not done a good job on telling our families on where they might, our families and commanders, on where they can go for funding things to help support the Key Spouse program. And then we'll also build in tools like the budget that Mrs. Brown was talking about to help you think through, okay, well, this month is month of the military family or military spouse appreciation day, and give you some options of maybe community partners that are established that can help support those initiatives. We'll do a better job in the training of connecting the available tools and templates to what you're learning, like go here, start here, to make it simpler. It's not lost on us that we have to have like some in-person connection, right? Like it's important to make sure that we are connecting the faces to places after you've learned what some of the roles and responsibilities of the helping agencies on the base are. So the servicing MNFRCs will provide a local connection as the mandatory the mandatory capstone, if you will, of the training. And so we will give them the max flexibility to be able to deliver this. So some MNFRCs may have in-seat trainings that they're going to be able to do. Others may do it synchronously, but via Zoom, so everybody can learn and talk to the people, the subject matter experts at their bases live and in person, but not have to sit in the seat. So we'll have mandatory objectives that they have to meet, connections that they have to make, but how they deliver that will be flexible to meet the needs of the population there locally. A lot of the questions that we've gotten in this form, like in advance of this form, are related to what kind of training commanders get and command teams get. And we don't do a great job of giving command teams training. We brief the Key Spouse program at the command spouse trainings, but we don't get to brief them at the uniform wearer trainings. So we have MNFRC mandate to give incoming commanders at base level a briefing on the services that are available through MNFRC's Key Spouse program being one of them. So we're working on creating a standardized slide deck, so at least we can help in the messaging and know what messaging is being delivered when commanders come through that training. We also have an opportunity to brief new first sergeants, and so we'll be able to leverage the refresh Key Spouse program with them. And then we're building trainings and we're conservatively building training videos and vignettes into toolkits. I say that because we know that videos and vignettes are great ideas, but not highly utilized. And so I'll talk momentarily about a communication plan, a StratCom, that we're building for commanders, so that we can tie videos and vignettes into a StratCom plan. So it's not just like hanging out there, hey, you can go click on the video in your ample amounts of free time, commander. It'll be targeted messaging and targeted videos and vignettes. So we're working on those as well. And then if they go over well, we'll create more, but we're not going to have like just this huge bank of videos and vignettes that get 3 views. We want it to be a little bit more than that. We also realize that in the trainings that we deliver, we don't have great feedback loops or feedback loops at all. So you take this Key Spouse training, but how do we know that we taught you what you needed to be successful? We really don't. And so going back 6 months down the road, a year down the road, tell us how it's going. What did we not tell you that you needed to know? And what did we tell you that was irrelevant? And so getting that feedback will help us make continuous improvements to the trainings that we have. All right, I've seen this chat blowing up. So what we got, Denise? Anything we need to address here?
Okay, so a couple of things. One, there's a wide range of involvement and funding from each unit, which leads to inconsistency in the programming. Is there any way to make the program more universal?
No. So the struggle is real with that. We have spouses that want a universal like a standardized program. We've taken out the word standardized from our vocabulary as we've talked about the diversity and complexity of the units. The short answer is no. If you have ideas on how to do that and what needs to be universal, from our perspective, the universal is the readiness, resources, and connectedness. That's what all commanders, all command teams, all Key Spouses should be aiming towards, to have a connection with each other, a connection to resources, knowledge of the resources that are available, and how to get that help for families to make sure that we are mission ready. So no, it's a short answer to make it more universal. And I'm sorry about that, but I think that as a commander's program, it's going to look very different from unit to unit.
Absolutely.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Can I say something, Andrea? Part of that
can.
is, I'm sorry to interrupt. and I think you said the key word is it's a commander's driven program. So every commander walks into his squadron command or whatever leadership he's rolling that classifies as that bucket according to Air Force and space structure, pyramid structure, that they have their own ideas about how that they could go about. And often that has to fit with who they are as a person and how they look to lead, because how, you know, different types of personalities make very different types of leaders. And you can have two completely different styles of leadership, all of which can be very successful. So I think they kind of look to earmark it for themselves. But if you have very specific objectives, like the connectedness and all of that stuff, that they have to roll within whatever bubble that they want to use, or how they want to use their key spouses, that will uniform part of it, but it will always be up to the commander. And sometimes as a key spouse, you'll work really well with the commander, and in other roles, you might not, and maybe that's not where you play the role in that kind of assignment. But I just know, watching different command or key spouses over our long career, there's so many different kinds of skills that they bring to the table that a commander can utilize. But based on who that commander is really going to drive the kind of program that he wants it to be, and where he sees the focus would be for his unit to be ready and capable, so that they can complete the mission. Sorry.
No apologies necessary, ma'am. Appreciate you for sharing that insight. So thank you for popping in and talking through that. Really appreciate it. Awesome. All right. Anything else, Denise, that is in the chat to address?
Yes. So there's a couple more. So is there additional information that is planned to be provided to show the benefits of the program beyond the ops tempo and deployments and TDYs?
Yeah, so that is something that we've had ongoing discussions. If we want commanders to buy in that this program needs to be at the top of their priority list amongst all the other priorities that they're trying to balance, we need to better communicate how it impacts them, what a benefit it is to them. So as we're building our strategic communication plans, that's something that we're fitting into it to help demonstrate that this is what the program can do for you.
Okay, so this is a hard one. How
don't ask it, save it for later.
No, this is what is on everybody's mind, I think. How do you make initial contact with them if their spouse does not provide contact information?
I know. I'll talk more about that in the next slide. Some of the headway that we've made on the most challenging challenge that should not be a challenge, right? Like if you're expected to make contact with spouses, you need a way to contact them. I get it. As I said, I've been doing this program for about 1.5 years now, and I thought this is ridiculous. For 20 years, we've not been able to provide a spouse roster. That's the first thing I'm going to change. And here I am 1.5 years later, unable to change it. So I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide.
Okay. Do you want a couple more?
I do not. It's 8:02. So yes,
okay.
But not right now. So save them.
We'll
please.
come back. Yep.
Yes, ma'am. And so all right. So we'll take a quick break and we'll get back after it in 10 minutes.